Hello and welcome to not episode 5, but episode here on Pacific Horse Players on the HHH Racing Podcast, covering this year's Breeders' Cup. Specifically, Ryan and I will be talking about the Del Mar track, trends, profile, a lot of good stuff. Going to give some good information for you guys. I know Ryan and I are looking forward to it. Not a lot of times that we get to talk about Del Mar and the Breeders' Cup at the same time. So we're very fortunate to do that. But before we go ahead and give you some of that information, we're going to go through some admin here. Of course, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. We got one more weekend for our Keeneland Power Pick, so make sure if you want to check that out. I think we got 2 more editions with Friday and Saturday. This year, closing day is on Saturday, so make sure you sign up for that. Breeders' Cup Power Picks have been available for a little while. We have gotten a great audience that has signed up, and people are signing up every day, and the audience just continue to grow. The support is awesome. I believe there's over 30 pages of information. It's going to have, write-ups from all of our hosts and co-hosts. All of our, we got ABC grids on there, top picks, top long shots for both Friday and Saturday. So a lot of good stuff. Again, over 30 pages of info. So make sure you go check that out. You can get that on our website right here, hhhracingpodcast.com. If you go to the website and type that into the toolbar there, Pete Visco makes it really easy, who is the creator of our website. Makes it really easy. You can go on top of the website there, the main page. Click on the banner there, or you've got the drop down bar that's got the Breeders' Cup Power Picks on there as well. Really easy to use. I believe it's $30 for our current Power Pick subscribers and $35 for our non-current. So really cheap, really affordable. It's like $1 a page. It's really not that bad for a lot of people who are going to be getting into the Breeders' Cup. So make sure you go check that out. And then of course you've got our regular Power Picks, $2.10 ROI over the last 3 years. You can do that at our website or go to patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast. Obviously, you get 2 full tracks, ABC grids, spot plays, all that good stuff. And then again, make sure you check that out on our website, hhhracingpodcast.com. That's going to wrap up our admin. Ryan, how you doing tonight?
Busy. This is show number 3 back to back, but another one I'm very excited for because this is something different. So it has been me just regurgitating the same words over and over again. Obviously started with the Pick 6 carryover with Jackson on Get Bucked, and then went over to the HHH Racing channel on the other show tonight, going over early thoughts on the post position draw. And now you and I get to speak about Del Mar Breeders' Cup combined into one. We get to talk about the track trends, which is going to be some really good content.
Why don't you go ahead and share for the audience what you and Ryan have been doing over on Get Bucked, both Monday and Tuesday. I know Monday you had some schmuck on there that wasn't very good, but Monday after that you guys had a really good show. So go ahead and tell everybody about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I assume you meant Jackson, not Ryan and Ryan, but I'll let that. Over on the Gallop Out YouTube channel, we're doing Get Bucked for the Breeders' Cup. Jackson and I are. We have a lineup of live guests coming on. We had Kaylee Shapiro, new person over at Nairo. We had HHH Racing regular Matt Miller on, and he was generous enough to help us do a giveaway with some of his books, A Better Way of Thinking. So go check that out. That's episode 2 of Get Bucked at the Breeders' Cup. We did that yesterday. But we're doing early thoughts on all the races. We've covered all the juvenile races Monday and Tuesday of this week. And then this coming Monday, I have another slate of guests, including Matthew DeSantis over at Naira. And then Tuesday on the 28th. So after all the post positions are out, we got Travis Stone coming on. I have Matt Dinnerman coming on, and I have Matthew Bernier coming on. So I'm excited to talk with all of them. We're going over the main, those big 5 races, the Dirt Mile, the Sprints, the Classic, and the Distaff. So that's what we got going on over at the Gallop Out. And today we get to talk about some track trends, which is going to be really beneficial for those looking to see how the Del Mar track plays that maybe don't, bet it most of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Before we do that, let's check out who we got in the chat. Matt Miller is not only an author, but he is a jokester, talking about how both of these nuts snuck through the Jockey Club. That's an amazing name. I love these nuts jokes. We got Michael Lawson, another show. Yes, another show. It's only gonna be about 45 minutes, so you can fight through it. We got Jackson, Gas Station Sushi. That's an interesting snack choice. Brad
No,
Anderson?
That was another name of a horse.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
They're doing horse names.
Gotcha. Brad Anderson, first Breeders' Cup show for me, ready to absorb all that Noah and Ryan have to share on the track. Then we'll deep dive into handicapping. Of course, Brad, happy to do it. We got Matt, we got Paul Conlon. I missed back in the late 80s when we party all weekend in the infield of Del Mar. Yeah, I really wish they could bring that back because unfortunately Ryan and I weren't around for the 80s. So we're a little too young for that.
The will be active for Del Mar. They turn it into their little beach cabana party. I do not have information yet of whether or not you have to have some special wristband or whatever, but I can try and look into that one. But I think it should be open if you have tickets to get in there.
Okay, awesome. Oh, we might have to go check that out. Let's go ahead and go into it. I've got some research I prepared a little bit to. This is not necessarily an opinionated show, just a little more factual. So I've got some stuff to share with us, and we can go ahead and go through it. This is the first thing I researched a little bit. I can bring that onto the screen a little bit bigger. I don't know if I can make that bigger. Let's see if I can. I can a little bit. So I did a little research myself, just looking at primarily the last two editions of the Breeders' Cup that have been at Del Mar, and just kind of where those winners came from. I divided it into turf sprints, turf routes, dirt sprints, and dirt routes. Obviously, the turf sprints and the dirt sprints, there aren't going to be as big a sample size, but there's still some stuff to learn, still some interesting things to key in on. And then the routes, I think, are really interesting, but we'll get into that. Starting with the turf sprints, we've had 3 turf sprints. I believe it was 2 for the older, and then 1 juvenile, I believe, which I think was in 2017. We've had 2 horses go wire to wire, and then one of them, I believe that was in 2017 with a 30-1 shot who came a little bit off the pace, but it kind of fell apart. Horses that could benefit or not benefit. Turf sprints are obviously wide open, especially at Del Mar. I'll let you talk about it a little bit, Ryan, but just the 5 furlong configuration at Del Mar is ultra tricky. If you have one bad step, one little bobble, it's really tough to make it up, and it's just such a big compromise at that distance.
It really is. No matter what field you're in, whether that's a Breeders' Cup or a first level allowance, if you take a bad step out of the gate, that puts you behind the 8 ball, and that is not easy to overcome going those flat 5. You have no room to make that up. Those turns are very tight. You cannot afford to lose ground on the turns. I mean, best case, kind of, you just hug the rail and hope that you somehow sneak through if you do take a bad step. But it's uber important to save ground on those turns at going the 5 furlong distance specifically.
Yeah, I got to check out the show that you guys just did on the pre-entry reaction. If you haven't gone and checked that out, make sure you do that. Not right now because we got a pretty good show here. But anyways, the horses that went to the lead that you see the favorite at 5-2 and the 5-1 price. I believe both of those were Wesley Ward. I want to say one of them was Golden Pal, and the other one was Twilight Gleaming. And you made a comment on that show where there's not a Wesley Ward in the body of the field. So that's going to be interesting. I think it could be wide open, especially in the juvenile. And then everybody's going to have their opinion about whether Cogburn is just a stoic cold single, or if he can get beat. You're shaking your head, so it looks like you think he can get beat.
Yeah, I'm trying to beat Cogburn. That's going to be the shortest play of the day. I mean, we're looking at the prices right now. Obviously, I don't think on that day there was a price that short. Looking at like 2-5, 3-5, which is probably what Cogburn's going to be for the turf sprints. But even in the turf route today, the best we got was 2-1. Yeah, the Breeders' Cup is not a day where I'm going to take a 2-5 unless I'm really convinced. And on grass, I'm not convinced on anything under probably 2-1 on Cogburn. And, that's just the odds that I think would be a fair bet for him, because I think it's a chance for someone to beat him.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got you're going to be covering it for Power Picks, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can't wait to release my thoughts on that one.
Yeah. You can keep that kind of boxed in for now, but we'll get to that. Moving on to the turf routes, you can see we've got a couple of favorites, quite a bit of favorites, 4 of 10 actually. 2-1, 5-2, 3-1, and 9-2. So not super heavy favorites. I believe a lot or a good chunk of those were from Europe, which kind of makes sense. And then you can kind of notice it's really hard to take this field wire to wire, especially on the Del Mar turf. And even even when it's not the Breeders' Cup, it's really tough to take them the whole way. Even if the rails are out, it's just really hard. It's easier for the horses to make up ground on some of the ones down on the lead. But it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, the non-starter is Modern Games, who I'm sure is going to be brought up several times leading up to the Breeders' Cup. But really, anything that kind of stands out to you, just a bunch of running lines, but anything to your knowledge?
No, I was happy you just clarified that. I was just going to clarify for the viewers just that what we're looking at right now is the chart of running lines from first point of call on the left all the way to where they finish, obviously at the start, and then those are the off odds. So yeah, obviously the non-starters, Modern Games, that was what it was. Yeah, I mean those turf routes, you don't want to be on the lead. It's going to be tough to wire. In general at Del Mar, you can only do it on a handful of occasions. It happened once or twice this summer. At the meet, one of them being Ice Cream You Scream, and then she almost did it again, but it was a weirdly run race. But that being said, in a Breeders' Cup, it's emphasized even more that there's going to be speed. There's horses that's their one way to go, so they're going to go out to the lead. You got to save ground again going over these two turns. Obviously, the rails are going to be down for this day, so even more emphasis on saving ground. It plays pretty fair. At least it should play pretty fair. You can see you definitely want to, be a little bit behind the lead, but you can also win from somewhat close up to it. As you see down at the bottom, the second most down, the 2-1 favorite that won came from just off of it. I want to say that was, is that Auguste Rodin?
No.
No, he ran at Santa Anita. I'm sorry. We're going 2021.
I don't 100% remember who that was. I believe it was a Euro.
Yeah, it was a Euro, but most of them are on the turf.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because normally Del Mar, like you said, plays pretty fair. You look at this here, most of them are coming from not too far back. You did see the one kind of in the middle there, the horse that ended up getting the job done 10-1, came from, I believe, was last in that race. And then down at the bottom came from 11th and 13th. But I feel like there's just such quality horses, you just cannot leave yourself so much work to do. And with the tight turns at Del Mar, got to save ground, got to work out a trip. It's just, you got to have some kind of luck involved. And just coming from that far back against talented, let alone U.S. horses. And then you got to factor in the Europeans and then the Japans obviously coming to Del Mar. It's just, I think you have to be somewhat in it is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I haven't done a ton of Euro research, so maybe with the information here, lean a little bit towards the Euros. That can be a little more tactical. It'll be one that comes to mind is Lake Victoria, which I know Howard said on his last show. He's the vibe that she might not come, which could definitely open things up. And I don't know what her kind of style is from, whether she's close to the pace, whether she comes from way off of it, but she looks to be a force to reckon with. And that's going to wrap up turf routes. I'll go ahead and go down
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Real quick on turf routes, I will say you do see a lot of similarities in those running lines, with the exception of those two. The bottommost one at 8-1, that was Yabir. So he's one of those bigger horses that just needed to get going. He came 12 wide around the turn, but he was just so much the best in there. It didn't matter. But a lot of the times you do need to be kind of mid-pack, maybe a little farther behind, but it really comes down to trip. You have to get some space. And if you get stopped at all with those tight turns and with how quickly those races are run, that puts you behind the 8 ball if you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. And, obviously it could be a little different with the 2-turn turf races and the 3 turns because the turf course itself is a little bit smaller. So when they run the filly and mare turf and the turf itself, those are going to be 3-turn races. And like you said, Yabir, just with that slow motor of his, just had to get going a little bit sooner. And then he was able to make that wide sweeping move. But for the purposes of this show, I know Ryan and I have lives, so I couldn't do that much deep diving, but enough to get the idea across. Going to dirt sprints, there's only 4 on the screen, and it was interesting when I did some research. The dirt sprints at Del Mar over the last 2 years that they've had it, the fields were not very big, so not a ton of data to go off of, let alone if that's going to be accurate data. We see horses have come from a little bit off the lead, kind of mid-pack. You had that 67-1 bomb in 2017. I don't remember exactly who that was. That came from way out of it. And I believe one of the horses that was either 5-1 or maybe it was the 11-1 was who was that West last year? Aloha West. Yes.
Aloha
Thank you.
West.
But yeah, any thoughts here typically Del Mar plays a little speed fearing. At least it did definitely over the summer, this past summer. But any thoughts when you see those 4 running lines?
Yeah, those 4 running lines. It was a kind of a weird summer, at least for that the Aloha West victory down at the bottom there. Just because the track was playing relatively fair, which is what you like to see. I don't know that we had the same track profile this past summer, but hopefully we get back to something like this for the Breeders' Cup, and I have a fair amount of confidence that we will. Aloha West won in a complete pace meltdown. They went, I want to say it was like 21 flat or something ridiculous to the first quarter. So they were absolutely flying around there. But just in general, the boys go 6 furlongs. They go a flat 6, and the ladies go 7. So that definitely plays into it a little bit. We saw last year going 6 furlongs. We saw Elite Power. He was able to just kind of power home because 6 was kind of right in his wheelhouse. So he kind of sat right off of it. And in that sense, it's going to play similar going 6. But again, if things get spicy on the front end and they're really flying, and if you see that second quarter anywhere, 44-1, I would say, it's that thing's going to melt down, break down towards the end. So that's something to look out for sure. But speed can definitely hold at Del Mar, as it did this summer pretty well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the distances and the configuration because not a lot of people know that. But the sprint for the boys is at 6. And then the sprint for the girls is at 7, which is why you see some of those boys when they pre-enter, like we saw earlier today, they enter into the sprint and the mile just because the 6 may be a little too short for them, but the mile might be a little too long. So interesting to see that, and then whether or not they go into those races can certainly affect the pace. And if we do get a hot pace in the sprint, which we should, I mean, you got you got the blacker horse, Straight No Chaser.
Yep. You have Skelly.
You got the horse at 1, the Phoenix at Keeneland. Yep. These names are passing me you
have Federal Judge.
You have
But just with Skelly and Straight No Chaser alone, that guarantees a 21 somewhere in the 21 second first quarter.
It should, yeah. I mean, at least on paper. Obviously, when you get to these races, we're gonna have no idea. Horses can not break. Horses can, not go to the lead. But we've seen some crazy stuff. But
for sure. And I know we're not necessarily handicapping this show here. We're more talking track trends. But in the sense of, Straight No Chaser and Skelly, I think just on face value, those are your clear 2 fastest horses. And the latter in Skelly has had gait issues. So there is a possibility going the 6 furlongs. If Skelly doesn't get out of there strong and Straight No Chaser is able to get to the front, he has speed where he's able to probably cross and clear if that's what's necessary, even if there is other speed. So that's something to look out for sure and take into account.
Yeah, so I've just pulled up the dirt routes, which you'll see 10 races, favorites 3 for 10, and all 3 favorites have been pretty heavy favorites. You'll also see some shorter prices. You have 5-2, which I believe was Gunrunner in 2017, and then 3-1 might have been. I don't think that was Corniche, but then the name is blanking me.
Going under 5-2 because 5-2 was Gunrunner. Okay. I want to say the 3-5 that you see, that was Life is Good.
Life is Good, yeah.
And then the most recent classic winner at the bottom, that was Knicks Go.
Knicks Go, okay. And thank you, Matt and Brad, for bringing that up. Knicks Go wire to wire is still an awesome moment. Hopefully we're able to repeat such a moment as some of those guys know. But yeah, anything that comes to mind or something that really pops to mind here, especially something that I noticed right away. Anything that you mentioned here that you see?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking at 5 wire-to-wire wins. However, 3 of those were the favorite, and 2 were some very, very talented, second or third choice horses that managed to go wire-to-wire. And then we look at this 50-1 anomaly in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, where Latrusco went 21-45 or something ridiculous, to the point where Larry Colmus was basically speechless on the race call. Yep, March Lorraine, exactly. Thank you, Matt Miller. And Dunbar Road. Yeah, I had Dunbar Road that day. That was sad. But moving on, other than that, if anything, it proves that while speed is good on the dirt, it's not everything. And it is possible when you go that fast, it can collapse. But obviously, you're going to want to be forward, as 4 of the 5 dirt routes run in 2021 were won in wire-to-wire fashion.
You want to know what I saw?
What's that?
Look at the fourth column. 2, 1,
Yeah.
2, 1, 1, 1, 1. So even these horses that are closing, you got to be pretty close to it late in the race. And even Marshall Rain, who was ninth early, made her way up to fifth, and she was on the lead. And she had Dunbar Road way to her outside, and then I believe it was Clairiere way to her inside, right? I mean, she was like in the fourth path. Clairiere was down on the rail. Dunbar Road was like 7 or 8 wide. But from like the eighth pole on, nobody really, made up a ton of ground. They were just kind of bobbing up and down. So you got to be close to it. It's going to be tough to make a couple lengths up, just alone in the stretch. If you're a horse like Sierra Leone, if you're a horse like Chancer McPatrick, you got to try and move early. Just because it's going to be tough. You gotta look at this. Jackson brings this up. 80% of 2-turn races are won by the quarter pole at the Del Mar fall meet. That is from Brad Free. Yeah, Jackson makes a great point.
Thanks, Jackson. That was one of 3 points that I had to bring up here. So I'll go ahead and delete that one. But yeah, that's great co-host by him.
Well, that might not even be 100% factual because maybe it's a 7. Can you confirm
it
that?
Was 70. I have 78.
Okay. Well, Jackson's just making up numbers at this point.
He's
Matt Miller makes a good point. None of the 3 winners that he had mentioned faced huge pressure, which is going to be interesting. I don't see a ton of route races this year where a horse on the lead isn't going to face pace pressure. I guess the only one that really comes to mind could be Idiomatic, but just kind of determines on the tactics with or Pete Anna if they do go to the lead or if they try to sit that stalking trip like they did in the Travers.
It's going to be interesting because obviously Idiomatic ran last year at Santa Anita in the distaff, and I want to say she won it in a very weirdly run race where they were all going up and down towards the end. Del Mar doesn't run like that necessarily. The point that Jackson brought up and the stats that we're looking at on the screen, when you get off that turn, you're at the top of the stretch. Whoever's in front typically is going to be in front. It's hard to make up ground going down the stretch. I don't know why. Even if it's not speed favoring, as we see, 2017, you could come from off of it. But when you get off the turn, that's where the race is decided. And you can like it or hate it. That's just the pattern we've seen in the Breeders' Cup. That's the pattern we've seen this past summer. Obviously, I think the numbers this summer were exaggerated, but at the same time, we're looking at 11 races right now, and 9 of the 11 were won at the quarter pole. That's pretty close to 80%. So, even though those numbers and the speed bias was pretty evident and pretty exaggerated this summer, it's still something that's prevalent.
Yeah, and a lot of it's going to come down to what comes out either. I don't know if it's Sunday or Monday of next week, but the post positions. If you got horses that have speed but draw to the outside, it's going to affect a lot of things. So we'll have to look forward to that. Obviously, these aren't the most accurate stats, just because a lot of different things can happen with the post position and all that. Something to look at. I really thought that that was interesting, especially in the fourth row. Got to be close. And then at the bottom, I got favorites 8 for 27 over the last 2 years at Del Mar, which is 30%, which is about average. It's not Keeneland favorites at 45 or whatever they're doing right now, but it's significant.
I will say that year in the Breeders' Cup was kind of an outlier in terms of what we were looking at with favorites. We're not going to have nearly this many odds-on favorites, but 4 to 5 was Echo Zulu, 7 to 5 was Corniche, 3 to 5 was Life is Good. We don't have those this year. It's a lot deeper fields, and something those 3 horses all had in common was they were clearly all on the lead type horses. Obviously, Corniche was Baffert. Life is Good at that point was Pletcher, but he was a freak of nature. It took Flightline to embarrass him. But sticking to the trends, I think a lot of that was just the best horse was in the best position for a lot of those races. And in the distaff in 2021, it was a situation where the best horse, well, maybe the best horse, went to the lead and just went too fast. So it's something that you should definitely keep an eye on, but I don't think we're going to have many 3 to 5 favorites in dirt routes.
Yeah, certainly. Next thing we will kind of look at, and which I spent a lot of my time within the last couple hours researching, was the post positions from the fall meet, last meet over in 2023, which normally during the summer, like we saw this past summer. It's a little more speed favoring. But during the fall, you can get some pretty fair track, both dirt and turf. So this is also divided into dirt sprints, dirt routes, turf sprints, and turf routes. I wanted to try to get in the last 3 years just to get a little bit bigger or more sample size. But I am a college student and a lot of things go on. But we can look at last year's. So in terms of dirt sprints, post 1 through 4, 15 for 148, hit at 10, about 11%. Post 5 through 8, 19 to 80, 23%. And then post 9 through 12, obviously in the fall, they don't have a ton of horses that run. But when they do, when they're drawn 9 through 12, 2 for 7, 28.6%. Anything that sticks out to you?
Yeah, dirt sprints typically run pretty fair, but being on the inside is tough. I know a few of those winners, their names are leaving me right now, but a few of those inside winners came because they were on the lead. So they went forward. It's tough to be behind horses breaking from those inside posts, going the 6 or 7 furlongs. 7 obviously a little easier as you have the entire length of the backstretch. Matt, this year feels very different. Very few standouts, and the standouts that exist aren't necessarily front runners. Completely agree. Katie, again, great insight that this year is full of surprises. It's full of a lot of horses. There's no real dominant horse in the dirt division in really any level. You can argue idiomatic, but at the same time, she hasn't looked the same as she has in previous years. So I think that's something you could attack from a betting perspective. But sticking to post positions here, sticking with dirt sprints anyway. 9 through 12, obviously, 2 for 7, but the 28%, that I think that trend would kind of continue if you had more runners, just because getting from the outside, sitting the second flight, kind of third path can be beneficial, especially if they're cooking up front.
Yeah, when I handicap Del Mar kind of on my own, I don't love the inside in dirt sprints, especially on the dirt. I just said that. I think the rail at Del Mar going one turn on the dirt is an absolute death sentence. So I typically try to stay away from those horses. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the tides. Please don't bring that shit up. That's my little mini rant. I don't need that in my comment section here. But nonetheless, I just think the rail is a really tough place to be. You got to be really good. And in these dirt sprints, if there's a horse that is a major player and draws the rail, I'm certainly going to be trying to beat him. And I hope that horse takes money. Not necessarily not going to toss them from all my verticals and horizontals. But I think it's something that matters and something that I'm certainly going to take a look into. We'll move on to dirt routes. Post 1 through 4, 9 through 6, 9, 4, 68, which is 13%. 5 through 8, 7 for 43, 16%. And 9 to 12, 1 for 4, obviously 25%, but only 4 races. Not much to go off there. Anything that comes to mind with 2-turn dirt races at Del Mar?
It depends on the configuration of the 2 turns. You have a 1.25 miles where you get the entire length of the stretch because you go back into the into the dirt chute kind of looking thing down on the far end of the stretch there. But then you have the mile races where you only have about 150 yards into the turn. So those two configurations, and then you have 1 1/16 and 1 1/8 are all run kind of differently depending on where you're drawn. So to that point, you want to be able to save ground. You don't want to have the 3 wide tracking trip both turns. That's going to take too much out of you, but that's pretty much any track. If you're going a mile, you definitely want to be 7 or in, is typically what I like to see, because you have to be able to get over and you have to be able to save some sort of ground. You can't be stuck grabbing a hot dog on both turns. But going the 1.25 miles, I wouldn't freak out too much. We should have a pretty big classic field. If I had to, guesstimate on that based on what we look at for the at least the pre-entries. So just to that effect, going the 1.25 miles, post position is not going to matter as much, in my opinion, because you're going to have that entire length of the stretch. But the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, it's gonna play a factor for sure. If you have, I'm blanking on names of speed horses that are going to be in there, but we'll say Muth. If you have Muth Seize the Gray, thank you. Seize the Gray in the Dirt Mile. So I've been talking horses just all day. All the names are jumbled together. You have Seize the Gray, and he draws the 9 in that race. That's going to be something you're going to want to look into, because if somebody sends from the inside, he's going to be stuck out wide, and that's not exactly where you want to be. So either he could be uber aggressive and get to the front, which I think would be the logical thing. But that is something to pay attention to for those mile races.
Can you please refresh myself and for the viewers how long the juvenile fillies and the what's the distaff?
Yes, the distaff is 1.1 miles.
Okay.
And I should have that now. I should know the
I
number
want
off
to
the top of my
say
head.
both of the juveniles are 1.16
1.16 miles.
Okay. So the 16th it's short. It's not unbearably short. I know in one of the races, Corniche ended up getting the job done in the juvenile. I believe that was 2017. Jackson confirms that is 1.16 miles. I believe Corniche was either drawn post 11 or 12, and he just had enough speed to be able to get out of the gate, get over, and then we all know what happened after that. But yeah, I think if in those 1.16 races, you can't be parked out in the parking lot. But at the same time, if you're 7, 8, 9, I don't think it's a huge deal. It just kind of depends on where you end up, dynamic of the race flow, position that you kind of want to be in, and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. The juvenile fillies and the juvenile, far outside. Yeah, he was the 12 hole. Was Corniche. He was hustled hard, and they crossed and cleared, and they did the Baffert, special of just get out, send him like a banshee, and get over. And that worked well because clearly he just kept going. But again, I don't really know what he faced that year.
Yeah.
But either way, dirt routes configuration, take that into account. 1.25 miles, again, almost negligible for the post positions because you can kind of get over from wherever. And then the dirt mile, you definitely want to pay attention to that if that draws a full field of 12.
Yeah. Moving on to the turf sprints. This is one where if you normally play Del Mar, you kind of have an idea about where you want to be in turf sprints. I was a little surprised. I know this is only 1 year, but I thought the post 1 through 4 would have been a little bit better. 12 for 84, which is only 14%. 5 through 8, 9 for 69, which is 13, and then 9 through 12, an absolute death sentence. Obviously, it's over 10, but definitely don't want to be parked out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And what's the stat that skews this just a hair is if you go to post 1 through 3 for these turf sprints for that fall meet of 2023, the number jumps up to somewhere in the like 28, 29, 30%. There was a very strange bias going on with those three. And over the summer, it was more pronounced as well of 2023. Coming into this summer, that was something that I played hard. I talked to our friend Frank Scatoni, and for the first 3 weeks of the meet, I was dead set on just boxing 1, 2, and 3 in every turf sprint. Didn't do any handicapping. Boxed them in an exacta, played it a couple times, and then just let the race run itself. The first 2 weeks, it had a pretty good ROI. And then from then on, I don't know what changed in the track, but you were able to kind of win from everywhere, which was good to see. The one key point is that you just need to save ground, which is kind of a recurring theme here, but especially on the tight turns at Del Mar and especially in the turf sprints, getting over to the rail, jockey intentions matter a lot. You cannot be too far back. You got to be, second flight. If you are drawn, posts 5, 6, 7 through 12 or whatever, second, third flight, because they don't really come back to you that much. You got to go get them. They're only going 5. They're not going 5.5. They're not going down the hill. They're not doing anything crazy. So that flat 5 plays pretty significant.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought the 5 furlong races over the summer were pretty fair. There was about a 3-week stretch where it was definitely difficult to make up ground, but definitely at the end, I thought it played really fair. It seemed like it's at that point for that good 4 or 5 week stretch toward the end of the meet and the end of the summer. I thought it was pretty fair, and I thought the rails made a big difference with the rails out. There were some shorter fields. I remember one of them was Sassy Nature, who came back and ran in the Green Flash and didn't end up doing well. As a horse that you liked and Kyle liked a little bit. That was one that I remember that was able to take him the whole way in a short field. But I believe the rails were out that day. So I think the rails, could have had something to do with that. But in terms of the summer as a whole, I thought it was pretty fair. I know the stats that a lot of people have referred to and that I've heard in the past was the a couple summers before that, where, like you said, post 1 through 3 were just lights out, like 40 something percent on the win end, 70 something percent in the money. So yeah, just reiterating what you said, inside's good, outside bad. Can't be too far back. And it'll be interesting to see, just because, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, those 5 furlong turf sprints are so tough. So when you got a horse like Cogburn, even though he could lay over this field, the configuration is definitely not going to be in his favor.
I will say, yeah, that's a great point. To the point of Cogburn, if he were to draw posts 8 or 8 or higher, 8 or at more outside, so 8 through 12, I think is the max that they would field. Maybe 14 for the sprints. Either way, if he were to draw one of those posts, that would be a major play, even more of a play against for me, because he's not going to cross and clear, and he would probably be parked pretty wide. And again, Cogburn, by far the most talented horse in this race, but unless I don't want to get into hypotheticals of where he would draw and what I would play, but he'd be very, very tough to endorse at an outside post going to 5 furlongs, because they're not going to let him cross and clear and get some easy lead. And he's not a need the lead type by any means, but there's going to be 11 other horses he has to contend with in here. So he might not get that dream trip. And that's ultimately what these sprints come down to.
Yeah. I know I can't think of a ton of the speed in that race off the top of my head. But there was a ton of speed in it last year. I believe all of the turf sprints were either 21 flat or sub 21 at Santa Anita last year. I know it was kind of abnormally hot and pretty firm at that point. But you make a good point with Cogburn. If he draws outside, certainly one to play against, and he's going to take a lot of money. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to overcome if he does draw, 8 and out. Last one we'll talk about is the turf routes, post 1 through 4, 21 for 152, which is about 14%. Post 5 through 8, 13 for 126, about 10. And then 9 through 12, which again, we don't get a lot on the turf, 4 for 31, which is about 13%, which is actually a little better than I expected.
Yeah. Again, the configuration's big on this one. So turf mile still at Del Mar. Good. Jackson Muniz says, good point. Ground loss is probably his biggest opponent next weekend. 100% agree. He's fighting the ground. He's racing the ground. He's not racing the other horses necessarily, as funny as that may seem. But turf sprint comes down to the trip more than anything, more than just like raw ability, more than jockey, more than all that. But going back to post routes or turf routes, excuse me, not post routes. That's a quarterback thing. So turf routes configuration is huge. Turf mile is obviously you're going to have a lot shorter run into the turn. For the filly and mare turf, you have 3 turns that you go because they go a mile and a half, mile and 3/8.
I believe a mile and a half. Yes,
mile and a half at Del Mar. They change the configuration every year. It's so impossible to keep track of. And I want to say the boys go 3 turns as well, if I remember correctly, because all I can think of is Yubir coming down like a freight train. So to stick on that point, the 3-turn races, it's tough to win from way back. It's tough to win from the far outside because you have an even shorter run to the first turn. Same with a mile. When you go on a mile and an 1/8, you have a lot more room to maneuver. And then I don't think we're going any mile and a 16th races. And I actually don't know that we're doing a mile and an 1/8 come Breeders' Cup Day on the turf, at least not on like the main body of the field.
I'm glad the boss threw that in because I was just thinking about it again, and I think I was wrong. Boys, a mile and a half, girls, mile and 3/8, but still both 2 turns at Del Mar. Make a good point. We saw it later in the meet when Didia faced up against Anisette. Anisette was able to save the ground and actually wasn't even able to get the job done. It was Hang the Moon, who you mentioned on the previous show, actually came back and won. And Anisette was a horse that was kind of parked out wide a little bit, not too wide, but I believe she drew post 6. She was a little wide on the first turn. She's a little wide around the far turn heading into the stretch. And that, didn't ultimately cost her, but it was definitely a factor, as it looked like she, might have laid over that field a little bit in a sense. But in terms of the mile and the mile 16th races, from experience playing Del Mar, being parked out 9 through 12, is similar to being parked inside in those dirt sprints, where it's just really tough to win from out there. One of the better angles that I like to use in my handicapping is when they run at Del Mar for the first time over the summer, and they're drawn out wide, and then even if they don't have the widest of wide trips, just starting there is even a disadvantage in its own right. So if they draw outside the first time and then they come back and run for a second time over the summer meeting, and they draw more inside, and they're going to save ground, that's a big angle for me and a big angle for a lot of people. Just starting there, I think, is a disadvantage in itself.
Absolutely. And for anybody that's, handicapping for these races, I know there's only a handful coming from Santa Anita. They're going to run in Breeders' Cup races. You can't handicap those two turf tracks. Like they're the same one.
Yeah.
Coming from Santa Anita to Del Mar and vice versa, they play completely different. With the way that those turns are set up, with the way that saving ground at Del Mar, in my opinion, is much more important. You can kind of go in the two path at Santa Anita. You can't really successfully do that much at Del Mar. So yeah, that was pretty much what I was sticking on. It's all going to come down to saving ground. And you see for the races at Del Mar, when Breeders' Cup is at Del Mar, you have trainers over the summer meet. They send their horses out. So like Didia, they had Breeders' Cup aspirations. Obviously, I don't think she ran to her full ability when she came and shipped out. But you have trainers ship their horses out, get them a prep, specifically at Del Mar more than I think Santa Anita, because the Del Mar configuration, especially on the grass, is so much different than those other turf courses because of those really tight turns, because of where you need to be at different points in the race.
Yeah, very different, like you said. The one that really only comes to mind that made a big sweeping move in a turf race last year was Master of the Seas, where he was parked out. I believe he was 14 of 14.
Mm-hmm.
But William Buick just kind of was able to tuck in as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. He was able to save a little bit of ground, but I think with the configuration and the wider turns on the turf course at Santa Anita helped him out. If that race was run at Del Mar, I don't think he gets nearly as close as he was. Obviously he ended up winning the race. Yeah. But it's really hard to make that big move. And you've got horses on the lead that are coming back to you. And if you try to swing wide and lose all that ground, it's really going to cost you, especially with those tight turns for sure.
It is 2 points on that. Excellent thing that excellent example you brought up with Master of the Seas. That's a pretty big striding horse. And that was in the mile, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So he was able to kind of get going and keep going. He wasn't interrupted in that stride. And that's kind of what we spoke about earlier, and that you can't get interrupted. And that is almost equally as important as saving ground. And then the other horse to mention is, again, Yabir. Yabir came about 6 wide around the turn, but he has that huge lumbering stride. He couldn't, stop once he got going, or he wasn't going to win. So that was something that was able to be sacrificed. But then you look, at a horse like Warlike Goddess. She tried that in the filly and mare turf. She tried to come wide, start that move so that she wasn't interrupted. But the horse Loves Only You was able to save ground, and she got the better of Warlike Goddess that day. I believe Warlike Goddess was best, but because she lost that ground, because she's not some, huge lumbering horse that has, a 2-to-1 stride type ratio, she wasn't able to get the job done. So, if you have a horse where they're a massive horse, Master of the Seas, Yabir, whatever, they're able to kind of sacrifice that ground. But every other example, you have to save ground on that far turn, and you can kick home on the turf course. It's not the same where, you need to have the lead at the quarter pole like on dirt. You can make up ground that length of the stretch. It's a deceptively long stretch at Del Mar.
Yeah, good point. Before we move on to a little bit of something that I want to get into, we've got a lot of people watching and commenting in the chat. So if you are watching, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification button. That would be much appreciated. And then, of course, make sure you check out our Breeders' Cup Power Picks tip sheet. Those are now available. We've gotten a huge audience and following. You can go check those out at HHHRacingPodcast.com. You go to the website, click on the blue banner at the top, or you can click on the drop-down menu, get 30 plus pages of info from all of hosts and co-hosts. We got ABC grids, spot plays, top picks, long shots, bunch of good information there. But before we wrap things up, just kind of what surfacing what we've talked about. I want to get your opinion on maybe a couple horses in some of the races, because you looked at the pre-entries. I haven't done a huge bunch of research on the pre-entries, but horses that you think are on the fence now and are maybe leaning one way or another, just based off of track profile and where they might draw in terms of post position.
Yeah. So sorry, we're talking horses that I like just on first glance here.
Yeah.
Well, we're starting at the right race because next.
So yeah, I figured you were going.
This is the exact type of horse that you want for Del Mar, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a big test of him kind of cutting back, which is not something you normally say when you're talking about the 1.25 mile Breeders' Cup Classic, but this is a pretty big cutback for this horse. So this horse is cutting back to the 10 furlongs. But I think this horse has shown an absolutely ridiculous turn of foot, which you don't typically see for dirt horses, and you definitely don't see for these marathon types. He's got a burst of acceleration that it's hard to compare, especially for a horse that spends most of his time towards the front. I think Luan Machado, assuming he sticks, should have this horse in the right position, maybe just a couple lengths off. I think Arthur's Ride's going to be a pretty dead send from that spot. This is one where post position could matter. If Next draws, 1, 2, or 3, and Arthur's Ride draws the 9, I don't know what happens there from a jockey intention standpoint, because Next could just shoot out, trying to keep and get that position, knowing Arthur's Ride and some others are probably going to be aggressive. But just to stick on Next, he can kind of make a move, maybe a little early, and he typically gets the lead by the quarter pole. And of course, that's typically the 1.25 mile mark in his marathon races. So this would be at, the mile mark of his race. So that's something to certainly consider. But if he can get in the right spot, I think he has the type of acceleration and the type of staying power, if you will, where it can be a threat. And then the next one in this race is City of Troy, who's clearly going to have forward intention going on the dirt for the first time here. It's kind of a fuzzy, if you will, in this race, because I don't know why he's kind of racing here. Obviously, they want to try him on the dirt, but he has a stud deal already in Ireland, I believe. So it's not to, stand on dirt in the U.S. As a sire. So I'm not sure. He's an interesting horse, and I don't entirely know what to do with him.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and answer Matt's question. He's asking if there is a concern with the cutback, if maybe he'll be too far back, or maybe it's just the fact that he's not fast enough to keep up with, I guess, the shorter distance for him. Because like you said, he loves to run all day.
Yeah, I don't think he's naturally fast enough to keep up with Arthur's Ride, who I think is going to be aggressive, just like he was in the Jockey Club and the Whitney. Obviously, Highland Falls kind of took it to him in the Jockey Club, but whatever. I think Next is naturally fast enough and can be hurried up to, maybe a length or two back from the lead. But I think that's a trip that could win here if a horse goes with Arthur's Ride. I think that horse could be dangerous. You're not hearing a lot from the Belmont barn. You're not hearing a lot from Arthur's Ride. And that's typically when his horses are doing the best. He's not really a big buzz guy that you hear on his horses. So I don't think that the cutback's an issue for Next at all. I've wanted to see him going 1.25 miles on dirt this entire year, and going back to last year, because us as fans deserve to watch this happen. And I think if there was any year I would like to see him in the Classic, it's this one. There's no standout marathoner on dirt, or there's no standout 1.25 mile Classic distance horse on dirt here for the older division, or for really any division. And Next has buried everybody else in this 1.5 mile plus race division. So I think this 1.25 mile is meant for him, and he should be ready for it.
Yeah, like you said, Arthur's Ride's going to go. He's going to be sending from wherever he is. I don't think it's really not going to matter. I don't think Next will be far off. If I had to guess and make a prop bet, as you will, as they're crossing the wire for the first time, if Next is less than 2 lengths away, I would be very surprised, and I would lose such prop bet. I think he's got to be pretty close. I don't, even though this is a pretty even group, and there's no real standouts, like you said, I think it's still a pretty talented group, and I don't know if he's really the horse to sit 2.5 lengths off, make that move, and then take the lead to the top of the stretch, and then hold off closers if there are some. I don't know, but I do agree with you. If he's going to take a chance, it's going to be this year of all years.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Last little point is I don't know that on a typical dirt course he'd be able to hold off closers because when
That's
you're able. But this course particular that we're talking about with these track trends, getting the lead at the top of the stretch is where the race is won. And I know that can be upsetting, to normal race fans who like to see a closer on turf or, the Sierra Leones of the racing world. A horse that has a huge lumbering stride that's able to make up a bunch of ground. I don't know that that's going to be as successful over the Del Mar dirt. So if Luan Machado can get that horse in position, within less than a half length of the lead turning for home, I think that's where next needs to be because he does have a good turn of foot and he has a good acceleration home. It's just going to be a matter of the class test for him in here.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Before we wrap things up, is there maybe one or two more horses that you're maybe on the fence on that might be aided by the track profile itself?
That might be aided by the track profile would be a horse that I am trying to find reasons to play against, but you can go to the distaff. And I think we all know the horse. It's going to be an Idiomatic.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play against this horse so bad. But the more I've only looked at this race a couple times in terms of the past performances, but the more I look, if Florent is aggressive out of the gate and he just gets this horse to an open lead, it's going to be tough to see this horse coming back to the field if this horse is 95% of what she was last year. And I don't really know that she is. All of her races, the last race at Keeneland, that was just she didn't face enough and was able to basically just have a paid workout going around there. But we saw what happened at Saratoga where Randomized went right with her and they both melted down. Randomized melted down and Idiomatic fought on and ran the race of her life in there, but was ultimately caught by Raging Sea. But that's not going to be the case in this race. I think if Idiomatic gets 46 to the half, I think she's gone.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I actually think Idiomatic is just as good, if not better, as she was last year. And I don't. It's tough. I'm going back and forth because obviously it seems like a little bit of a 2-horse race, but the group that she faced last year in this race, I thought was much collectively better than the group that she's going to face this year, which is, not any creative thinking. But at the same time, both the Grizzly Torpedo and then who's the Japanese horse who is undefeated and coming over?
Awesome Result.
Awesome Result. Yes. I don't know a ton about her. But for me, it's just determining whether those two are just as good as the group that she faced last year, because I don't think there's been a huge change in Idiomatic. I still think she's the same horse that she's been. She's been really good. She's been professional. The race in the Juddmonte Spinster, she just kind of toyed with that field. I don't know if she really gave everything that she had, and that was the prep that she had last year leading up to this race. So I don't know. Right now I'm leading Idiomatic, but I'm going back and forth. I could easily be persuaded by some other stuff. There's one race that I want to talk about in specific, and a race that I have a little bit of. I'll release it, a strong opinion. That's the Juvenile. It looks to be a little bit of a two-headed race with Chancer and with East Avenue. I'm a big East Avenue guy. I thought his race in the Breeders' Futurity was monstrous, and I don't think the race itself was even the most impressive part. Go and watch the gallop out. Tyler could not stop this horse. He wants to run all day. I don't think he needs the lead. He's going to sit right off probably getaway car because it's Taylor Swift and they're going to go balls to the walls and go 22-2 or something stupid, whatever the horse in the distaff a couple years ago did. I think he's really talented. I think he's the next superstar. I love everything about East Avenue. And I wouldn't be as confident at East Avenue if it was at any other track except Del Mar, for the reasons that we've mentioned, and that East Avenue is most likely going to have the lead at the top of the stretch. And I just don't see him losing it from there. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I like what you brought up. Unfortunately, with as talented as Chancer McPatrick is, I don't think this is his race because of the track. and the way it plays, unless he makes a really, really early move and is able to just kind of stay there. But to stay on East Avenue, I think some of this is going to come down to post position, because I think if a horse like Getaway Car draws to the outside of East Avenue, that could be a problem. East Avenue has not faced a lot of adversity, and while he's won the right way, it hasn't necessarily been with much trouble, or having being forced to take a lot of kickback. Now again, uber talented horse, has made Ferocious look pedestrian almost in that last start, and Ferocious was chasing gamely. And obviously we saw the showdown between Ferocious and Chancer up at Saratoga on what was that, closing weekend or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you have a horse like East Avenue with a lot of potential, and it's clearly already shown what a great racehorse he can be. But in that race, to me, it's a horse kind of like gaming. That's a bit interesting to me. I want to see the tactics on Akoro Azel, the Japanese runner that's coming over, because I believe he has a little bit of speed, so that could be an interesting addition to that race. Some of that is going to come down to post position. It's a 1.1/16. You don't have a whole lot of room to maneuver and get to that turn. If it's something where East Avenue draws the 1, gaming is on the 2, and I don't know, Getaway's 5 or whatever, and Getaway Car gets to the front, gaming's going to keep East Avenue in. You'd have to imagine East Avenue is probably going to have adversity. But on the flip side, if Getaway Car drives the 7 and East Avenue the 8, they might just go 1-2. Top of the stretch, East Avenue takes over and gets the nice clean trip. So the Juvenile and the Juvenile Fillies are 2 races to definitely keep an eye on for post positions, because I think that's going to play a huge factor, both with the 2-year-olds having a story of trips is huge for them, because some haven't faced adversity and some might not still, depending on the post draw. Whereas a horse like the Classic, you have plenty of time before that first turn.
That's a great point. I think there's a handful of races in this year's Breeders' Cup where post position is really going to matter. The 2 that you mentioned, the 2 juvenile races, obviously the turf sprints, that's going to play a big factor. And then you've got some of the kind of the head-to-head races and some dynamic stuff. Oh my God, I just died. But you look at Torpedo and Idiomatic. It'll be interesting to see where those 2 draw, and that could formulate some opinions there. Especially in the Classic, people will look at that with how Next ends up going, and Arthur's Ride and some of the others. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's going to wrap things up for us. We're running on minute 58 of this episode. Ryan, he is running on fumes right now. But before we go, make sure you go ahead and tell us what you guys got coming up with some special guests over at Get Bucked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Get Bucked. We're going Monday and Tuesday of next week. We have special guests. We have Travis Stone, Race Colorado at Churchill Downs, and Matthew DeSantis, NYRA guy who is excellent at everything handicapping, everything just insight-wise. So he's going to be very valuable come next week. And then that is on Monday. And then Tuesday of next week, we have Matt Dinnerman and Matt Bernier joining the show. We're going to be live 4 p.m. Pacific. Both days, Monday and Tuesday. We'll go for probably an hour and a half or so. Monday is the post position draw, so we'll be live during that time as well. I think it'll just be Jackson and myself for right now, and then we'll just kind of be going through it. It'll be nice and light, and then we'll get right into it. We're going to start giving our early thoughts, and then that's going to be the main or all the not lesser races because it's the Breeders' Cup. But Tuesday, we're going over the Classic, the Distaff, the Turf, and those big turf races. So those will kind of be what we cover. But I'm really looking forward to it, and that's over at Get Bucked. And then, obviously, you and I go the day after that on the 30th, and that's on Wednesday, doing PHP.
Yeah, looking forward to the shows that we're going to be doing. The 2 shows that we are going to be doing, make sure you guys check out, because our 2 shows are going to be taped. So make sure you check out when those are going to be released. And then obviously we've got our live shows with Picks and Ponies and Betting and Boozing. So again, make sure you check your schedules. That's why you got to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any of the action. For my co-host Ryan Anderson, this has been Noah Meagher on Pacific Horse Players, covering 2024 Breeders' Cup and the Del Mar Track Trans and Profiles. Take care. See you guys next week. PHP out.